Hi everyone, my name is Aaron Kinsbrunner. Welcome to today's session, Keeping Your Continuous Test Automation Suites Continuously Valuable in DevOps. Just a word about myself before we get started. So as mentioned, my name is Aaron Kinsbrunner. I'm a Chief Evangelist and author at Perfecto by Perforce. I'm a blog speaker for almost 20 years now in the industry of software development and testing. You can find me on all social channels, including Twitter, LinkedIn, and such. You can also follow both my personal blog, continuoustesting.blog, and the Perfecto blog, reachable at perfecto.io website. And in today's webinar, what I wanted to discuss is how, especially when you are practicing Agile and DevOps, how you can keep your test automation suites, whether they are coming from your developers, test automation engineers, or third parties, whoever is contributing to testing, how you can keep them continuously valuable as your product evolves, but also as the market shifts, because both have implications on the validity and value that your test automation suites are bringing to your teams. I'm going to start the session with a short market overview and also remind some of you the Agile Testing Manifesto and give you a nice trick on how to read it in an easy way so you understand and you can actually also convey the right message to your counterparts. I'm also going to focus on some of the test automation challenges that once you know about them and can also resolve them, you can make sure that your test automation that is being delivered continuously remains valuable. I'm going to also talk a bit about test automation certification. That's how I would label the term. And how to maintain the testing, as your product and market shifts. That's what I mentioned earlier. This is how I call what I call test aging. Okay, tests are valuable for one version, maybe 2 or 3 versions. Sometimes they are valuable for longer, but at a certain point, they are they are getting less and less valuable and are not really serving their purpose. I'm going to wrap up this session with a short demo of how you can run a test automation at scale, but mostly focus on the reporting side or aspect of your execution. So today, if you look at the landscape, obviously digital is becoming more and more important, more and more valuable to everyone. Everything today is done either via mobile or web, and it needs to work. If it doesn't work, you're simply at risk from a business standpoint. So you do want to make sure that you have a good testing strategy for your digital asset, but also you want to make sure that you are continuously up to date with everything that you are doing, because as the next few slides will show you, the market really doesn't stop regardless of anything that is happening out there in the world. New platforms, new browsers, new operating systems are still being released, and you want to be on top of them. So with that in mind, let me just go over, and there is really no more room on the slide for more challenges. I'm sure that there are probably a few more, but from me being in the industry for so long, these are the top challenges that I was able to gather that are at the root cause of issues, noise, and testing becoming less and less valuable to the organization. Feel free, in the Q&A or in other comments offline to let me know if I've missed any major pain point in test automation. So let's start with the automation skill set. If you look at the automation skill set, you will see that at the end of the day, we are looking at 3 main practitioners that are involving in test automation. We are looking at SDETs, we are looking at developers, and we are looking at business testers. If they are not skilled enough, if they are not working on the right test automation framework that matches their skill set, obviously the end result won't be as good as intended. Okay? And oh, by the way, you can see the arrows. So from each pain point that you see here, there are some outcomes and other implications. Some of them are when you do not have the right matching between tools and skill set, or you do not have the right skill set, obviously you cannot cope with advanced automation scenarios, meaning you're doing more and more manual testing, and this can also result, going back here, into test maintenance issues, escape defects, and many more. Testing is often done separately, okay? Testing is done only after the developers kind of gives you the permission to test, which is a bad practice. When you are waiting for the developers to throw you a new build for testing, usually at the end of the sprint or quite close to the end of the sprint, it puts you in a very difficult position because you do not have enough time to automate, and you're starting to take risks. And when you're taking risks, obviously, you are making mistakes. You can look at others, test environment setting up, applications that are not designed for testability, lack of time to automate, which is close to the testing done separately, too much time spent on analyzing results because you do not have the right test reporting infrastructure, the ability to merge your test into a one solid CI/CD pipeline rather than having shadow CIs, okay, which is quite common today. You want to make sure that everything that is valuable falls into one single continuous integration flow and not like having a set of CI jobs running and no one really knows what's going on. So if you look at what's going on in the market today, in the digital landscape, you're going to see that, as mentioned earlier, the market doesn't slow down, okay? We are now, after Q1, we are actually in Q2 of 2020, you can see that in Q1, we are looking at 6 major operating systems in Android, with the 7th one, Android 11, which is in mature beta, 3 to 4 iOS and iPadOS operating systems, and this is just the platforms. If you go and move towards the devices themselves, you can see that you have a bunch of permutations between the Android devices and the different customization that the device manufacturers are building on top of the stock OS, okay? Just looking at one example, Samsung Galaxy S20, which is the latest one that runs on Android 10, is actually running on Android One UI 2, which is a custom OS coming from Samsung built on top of Android 10. Android 10 stock OS that runs in the market today is mostly on the Google Pixel devices. So there is a gap between Pixels and Samsungs and Huawei's and LG's, making the landscape and your test automation coverage in general a bit more complicated. And oh, by the way, if you look, in the upcoming months ahead, nothing is changing. You see the traditional smartphones and tablets, as well as the operating systems, still going to be out and released to the market, including, in a few months, the iOS 14, that's a typo here, so iOS 14 is going to be released with a GA in September. So this is what's coming on the mobile front. On the web front, also, the landscape is quite fragmented. These are just a few examples of the different desktop browser OSs and Windows OS families. You can understand that, let's say you're developing and wanting to test on a responsive web application. Think about the combination of the previous slides. I'm not even talking now on the functional test suites and the non-functional test suites. I'm just talking about the target platforms in the lab that you want to cover. It's a lot to deal with, and it's shifting month over month. Okay, you can look at the web calendar for H1 2020. You can see each month you have a new browser version released to the market. You need your lab to follow. Otherwise, even if you have a good testing suite that is up to date, it's outdated once you didn't update the lab with the recent browser version. And betas are public, okay? You can download a Chrome public beta as a user without any issues. So testing on beta versions is very, very important. Another aspect of test automation coverage, and I am focusing on the coverage before I'm talking about the test automation value, because it's, if you do not understand the relationship between coverage and value, this is, I would say, a common issue in the industry, okay? You can have, again, the best test automation suite that covers all the functional business flows in your application, whether it's mobile or web. But it's really not covering everything if it's not covering all the real user environment conditions, such as networks on this slide, such as all the different browsers and mobile device permutations that are up to date, okay? So it's all in one. There is no, good thing done with the test automation development if you do not complement it with a good test automation coverage strategy. So in this slide, I'm just showing, the differences between different mobile network carriers in the US, and you can see that no carrier is behaving the same. And why is that important? Because as a user, whether I'm consuming a responsive web application on my mobile, smartphone, or tablet, or I'm using a mobile native application that uses network all the time, I need to understand what's the real user condition across the state, because these carriers behave differently. They support different capabilities. They have different 5G coverage restrictions. They have different latency results and stuff like that. So it needs to be taken also under consideration. So with that digital overview, I want to focus or help you read this Agile testing manifesto, because when you're doing continuous testing in an Agile or DevOps environment, this is how you want to read the sentence. Again, focus only on the bold. Continuous testing of all testing activities that gives value that are done across the team to cover the product business scenarios. Product coverage means that you are covering all the business flows, the key business flows, and not just focusing on code coverage. Code coverage is not really what your end users are consuming. Obviously, this is the code that runs your features, but you want to focus on key business transactions, okay? So keep this sentence in mind: continuous testing of all testing activities, both functional and non-functional, that gives value. Not everything, only the things that are giving value. And by the way, things that are giving value change between one iteration to the next, okay? So just carrying out a test suite that was run, was executed 2 software iterations before doesn't really qualify to be as good as the previous one in, today's iteration. Why? Because there is a lot of backlog that got into this new build that you want to make sure that you're covering, okay? So it's a constant struggle, it's a constant activity, constant auditing of your test suite, of your continuous testing suite, to make sure that it still gives value. And if you look at, the DRE, the defect removal efficiency, that is kind of tied back to the previous slide and the slide with the pains or the challenges in test automation. This is a nice metric, and I will provide you some nice additional metrics going forward in this session. But if you are not really shifting your test automation left, you're going to get a lot of escape defects to production. That's what DRE means, actually, okay? The defect removal efficiency means how efficient are you in identifying defects prior to them slipping to production. And if they are slipping to production, in this box here, these are the root causes that we have, and I have actually uncovered over the past few years. I'm not covering the right environments, the right platforms, the right test scenarios. I'm late in doing test automation, and I'm doing too much manual testing, which is not really counted for. This is another root cause of escape defects to production. Simple things that cannot be automated because the app is not well designed for testability. Lack of unit testing, outdated environments and platform. Not just the test scenarios are outdated, but also the environments that we are testing against are outdated. These are just a few, but very important root causes of defects that are detected later in the cycle, either in production, that's the worst case, or in UAT, which is still quite late in the game. okay? So you want to make sure that you are shifting your test automation, functional and non-functional, against the right test environments as early as possible in the cycle. And while you will say, well, it's clear that's the definition of Agile, we still see today, 2020, that there is a very low percentage of test automation in general, and even lower percentage of test automation that is done in a shift left kind of manner in different organizations. And if you want to be more specific, okay, from a research that Perfecto conducted, we found out that, out of these all defects that are slipping to productions or are, popping up in your test results, sometimes they are recurring, and I will address these recurring failures later on in this session. We see 4 root causes that really causes noise. Okay, I'm talking here about losing value from test automation investments. We are looking at the scripts and framework issues, backend issues, lab issues, and test automation orchestration issues. These are the 4 main pillars that fail your test automation. I'm not talking here about bugs. I will talk in the next slide about bugs. This is just pure noise. And the noise, I will not drill into each and every bucket here, but you can see just as an example that scripts and framework issues can be caused by using the wrong element locator. This is the objects. Coding skill set, going back to my slide on the automation panes. Time, okay, the synchronization between and the readiness of the platform and the test automation. For example, I'm trying to execute something on a screen while the application is not yet in the ready state mode. Okay, and there are things around the lab itself. The device is disconnected or unavailable or locked. The screen is locked if you are looking at a mobile device. Okay, and there can be many more. The main reason I put this slide on is if you want to develop a valuable test automation suite, again, continuously, keep that in mind, you want to have these 4 key questions answered or known to you as a decision maker at any given point. What's wrong with my scripts? If I executed a cycle overnight, when I'm coming in the morning and I see, I don't know, X percentage of failures, I want to know as soon as possible why they fail. What is the noise? What are the real bugs? What's wrong with my backend? There are a lot of issues that are caused by backend services, backend availability. Okay? What's wrong with my lab? Do I have device stability issues, browsers that are not well configured, stuff like that? And obviously, am I under capacity? Am I trying to run at a larger scale than my lab allows me to do so? That's the execution issue. So again, as a decision maker, QA manager, developer manager, development manager, you want these questions in front of you answered as soon as possible upon each and every execution. And if you want some science behind that, this is something that I took from Sogeti Labs, and you can look at your own, and challenge that data or statistics with your own current projects. But basically, if you look at an example of a regression suite that includes 10,000 test cases, typically this suite will produce 20% failures. Just keep in mind that out of these 20% failures, only 20 failures, 20 test cases out of 10,000 will probably be real bugs. All the rest are false negatives, noise, okay? And again, keep that in mind. The session title is Keeping Your Continuous Testing Valuable Continuously, okay? Even if this is happening once, you are already losing in front of your management, in front of your developers. They are lacking trust in what you are investing time, resources, and obviously money. So you want to make sure that you are shrinking down the amount of false negatives. And how you do it, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks. But basically, you do not want to expose test automation suites, scripts, scenarios that are not ready for prime time. If they are not consistent enough, if they are not valuable enough from the get-go, from the moment you develop them, they should not be entered and executed, in any official test automation cycle. And there can be cases where you actually thought that you had a good test when you developed it, but you know what? The market shifts, your platforms are upgraded, your environments are getting upgraded, and the product gets upgraded. You want to be on top of this because no one will forgive you, even if you had good, 3 cycles in a row running fine, and you had 1 cycle that is showing these exact numbers, you will get yelled at because you are wasting a lot of time from your developers and test automation engineering that they now need to, debug over 2,000 test cases that are failing just because of noise. So let's see how can we certify the test automation to try and reduce the risk as much as possible. We want to start by not, the old-fashioned test automation strategies where, I can automate whatever I want and I can automate things because I can. This is not a good strategy, obviously. Okay, I think that everyone already understands that. But what needs to be actually the good strategy behind that is you want to think about continuous value. You want to automate something that you believe will be valuable, not just for the current scenarios and current application version, but also in the next 2 or 3 iterations. If you do not think like that, this test case can be actually executed once and manually and, put it aside. If you see that the test will continuously deliver value, will continuously cover a feature that is in the high business transaction within the app, yes, automate it. But when you automate it, then you need to follow, the reliability and value of this test case over time and across platform. Okay, you need to make sure that this test doesn't really run and passes only on your, local device or browser. It actually can run and produce consistent results across different platforms, websites, web browsers, and mobile devices. Also, the execution time of a script should be not too long. What do I mean by not too long? Less than 5 minutes, if possible. If it's less than 3 minutes, it's even better because you know what? A test automation cycle today, it's not what we used to have in 5 years ago. We want fast feedback. Okay, we want to get root cause of issues as soon as we can upon each code change. And if a test case, and you have, let's say, 50,000 test cases, I'm just exaggerating, and each of them will take 5, 6, 7 minutes, this will be an endless cycle. And actually, it means that one of the scripts or many of the scripts are too complicated from the get-go. It means that they are carrying too many dependencies, and they need to be broken down into smaller chunks. Okay? If you have a gut feeling that something is wrong in this easy certification method, simply rewrite the test. Okay? Do not go with or against your gut feeling and include it in your scripts, because this is how you introduce new noise into the suite. If something doesn't smell right in the beginning, it means that this test is wrong. Rewrite it, refactor it, change the flow, shorten it, validate that it really, is worth the pain. Because you know what, when you include a new test in a regression cycle, whether it's a functional script or a non-functional, it's yours to maintain until, you end of life it, and it can be a long while. So be very, very picky about what you automate. And once you decide to automate things, this is when metrics, KPIs, and monitoring comes into play. Okay, these are just a few examples from my previous book mentioned in the first slide of this session, Continuous Testing for DevOps Professionals. And this metrics, a set of metrics actually, are divided into 3 considerations: into speed, which is kind of the velocity of your release cycle, quality, and the cost to the organization. Each metric here, and you can have your own, add your own, or use a few of these, gives you some kind of a mirror into what's going on in your organization. It gives you, definition of how good I'm covering my business requirements, how long my test cycles takes, how good is my CI/CD pipeline, how much I'm spending on an exploratory testing cycle. And exploratory testing are quite good. How much time am I spending takes me, to identify a new defect. This is the MTTD. And why is that important? If I do not have a good test automation coverage, it takes me too long to find defects. This is where I have escape defects. Mean time to detect can be a long time. Can be, the developer wrote something, it wasn't captured in the traditional cycle, it got released to production, and maybe after 3 months from the release, some end user identified the bug. This is the mean time to detect. It means that you have a huge issue in your test automation coverage. Okay, so these kind of things really allows you, this kind of metrics allows you to kind of check yourself around how valuable my continuous testing processes are across the board. Because as mentioned in the previous slides, it's not just the QA guys who are contributing quality to the product, it's also the developers, the business testers. So you want everyone to know where they can improve and where they have, key bottlenecks, like the MTTD example, and many more. So I kind of gave you a hint about the 3 personas. So when you have the previous slides of certifying test automation coverage, I'm coming to this 3 personas angle from a code quality stabilization point of view. And what do I mean by that? If you look at these 3 personas, the developers, the SDETs, and the business testers, when they all work in a balanced mode to deliver test automation code to the product and cover sufficiently all the functionality, you have a very high chance of minimizing all these MTTD issues, the escape defects to production, going back to the DRE slide. But when you have a misbalance between these different personas, obviously all these metrics are going to blow in your face as a QA manager or a development manager. So A, you want to have a good balance between these 3 personas, and B, you want to make sure that these guys have the right tools to match also their skill sets, so they really kind of complement each other without overlapping or struggling with technologies. Okay, think about these 3 enablers of people, process, and technology. This is one slide that talks about people, process, technology across 3 different personas. You want to match the people, the personas, the technologies, the processes, also with your test automation activities. One of the Perfecto customers, I'm zooming in now, and I won't mention the name, is actually executing over 1 million test automation scenarios in 1 quarter. This is a huge amount of testing that is being performed. But what I like about this customer is the mix of technologies and functions that is using across different personas to automate all these different applications. So you can see here Espresso and XUI test here, and Selenium, and some interactive testing, and Codeless. So this customer of Perfecto kind of took my previous slide to the next level. It took the SDETs, the test automation engineers, the developers, and the business testers, and kind of throw them into this nice dashboard to show that if you collaborate, if you share the different load of test automation creation and execution, you can be quite successful. You can expand your test automation coverage and identify issues as early as possible in the CI/CD activities. So this is a nice example of sharing personas across different technologies. And I will give you a much more common open source kind of example of sharing resources across different technologies, so you get the point even clearer with other non-Perfecto examples. At the end of the day, if you put these 3 personas that I mentioned earlier in front of this slide, you want to make sure that each and every persona can relate to these 6 buckets. It needs to select the test automation framework that A, matches its skill set. You can see here the SDLC process fit. It can integrate to the environments that these test engineer works on. It matches the skill set. It supports all the plugins, whatever the product uses. It has a good community behind it. The test automation tool needs to have good documentation, good support, and it's up to date with everything that is going on in the market. It needs to give me really fast feedback. This is the feedback loop that I talked about. If it takes you too long to understand what's going on, you are losing precious time, and the MTTD obviously grows. Mean time to detection of defects. Automation coverage. Automation coverage is talking about the advanced capabilities. Can the tool automate advanced capabilities, advanced scenarios? Think about a mobile application. Can I fully automate all the sensors, all the interactions with the camera, the location sensor, the audio sensors, everything that is going on my device? If I can't, this is the backlog that I'm starting to grow from a manual standpoint. Can it plug itself? Today, everything shifts to the cloud. I'm representing a cloud vendor, Perfecto, and we see cloud as one like many years ago. There is no sense, no cost efficiency rationale behind doing things locally. Shifting to the cloud, and I will finish this session with giving you some of the benefits of shifting your testing to the cloud, but scalability, reliability, keeping up to date with everything that goes on in the market. These are just a few examples of benefits of the cloud. If the test automation is proprietary, it's closed, doesn't have REST APIs and stuff like that, and cannot communicate with my test automation framework, that's a miss, okay? So you want to see that your test automation framework, whether it's commercial or open source, connects well to a cloud so you can scale your test automation. And finally, obviously, the automation robustness and maintainability. How easy it will be for me to keep my test automation valuable, because that's what we care about, right? This is the session. The session is about how to keep your test automation suites continuously valuable. So if something changes and it takes me ages, or my test automation framework does not support these up-to-date changes in the platform, and I cannot scale and maintain my scripts easily, I'm going to be left behind. And this obviously has quality implications. So these are just few considerations for test automation frameworks that can support the continuous value from test automation activities. If you look at, the current market, so I gave you in the beginning a nice market landscape overview from a coverage perspective on the platforms, on the web, desktop web browsers, and the mobile devices. But now let's look at some tools. So if you tie it back to the previous 6 boxes of consideration, you look at different stages, different frameworks that are seeing different maturity and adoption levels in the market. You can see here how Selenium is still the market leader, the top number of downloads over the last 6 months. Protractor is catching up with Puppeteer as a headless browser. Cypress is also becoming quite popular, especially by developers that are doing front-end web testing. WebDriver.io, okay, still quite popular. Why is that important? It's important from the exact first bucket in the previous slide about the community, the level of support, and the maturity behind these tools. You want to attach yourself and select a tool that everyone uses. Why? Because you have feedback, you can consult with the industry, you can get support when it's needed, you can see some code samples to get you up and running much faster, and many more. This is just, I would say, a double click on the previous slide, showing you that you actually have a larger selection today. The market doesn't really lack any tools, especially on the open source category. And if you have an additional need for mocking capabilities, for test coverage, code coverage capabilities, these are just few more tools that I can recommend, like Istanbul, Mocha, and other frameworks that are quite popular. And the popularity obviously changes, you have seen in the previous slide, but these are some very good examples that are kind of categorized based on use case and needs. As I promised, I shown you one of the customers that is running across multiple frameworks based on different personas and skill sets. So actually, I took this customer example, and I extracted the customer and just took the market as a test. And what I've done on the left end, I looked at Selenium and Appium. Okay, these are obviously the most popular functional end-to-end frameworks for test automation of mobile and web. I looked at XUI, Espresso, and actually Cypress can also be in this bucket, which are mostly dev-focused frameworks for unit testing and stuff like that. I looked at Codeless, and I looked at Cucumber BDD or other BDD frameworks. And what I've done, I looked and tried to do a comparison between the different tools from a benefit standpoint, but also from what's required from a skill set, so I can match the three personas across these different tools. And look at what I've discovered. No surprises, at least from my end, but I think it's a very powerful example that shows you that when you do look at, as in an objective eyes, at the market, and you look at Selenium, Appium, XUI, Test Espresso, Cypress, Codeless, and BDD, these are a nice set of technologies that when you combine them and divide them across your feature team, again, which consists of SDETs, developers, and business testers, you can maximize your test automation coverage. You can reduce the time it takes you to maintain the scripts because you have more practitioners owning pieces of your test automation rather than having everyone or everything falling on the SDETs. That's the common thing today. Obviously, when you divide the work to more practitioners, you are much more efficient. It's easier for you to respond to change. It's easier for you to maintain scripts and so on. So on the Selenium Appium, obviously the SDETs will feel much more comfortable maintaining, developing, executing, and monitoring the tests. When you're looking at unit testing, headers browser testing, as I mentioned earlier, Cypress, for example, you will see that developers will feel much more comfortable in these environments. And it requires good coding skills. By the way, both Selenium, Appium, and the XUI Test Espresso of the world requires developer skill set. This is clear. However, if you go and complement some exploratory and manual testing with Codeless, Codeless does not require any coding skills. It's a simple record and playback that is kind of powered by machine learning these days. You can look at the Perfecto.io website. You can find the Perfecto Codeless Selenium tool. It's a full-blown record and playback with machine learning algorithms that enables business testers to get started with automation. And lastly, you have the BDD. Perfecto Quantum is another implementation of Cucumber BDD for mobile and web testing, but opposed to Codeless, to be successful in BDD, you need the help of either a developer or a business or an SDET to help writing the step definition in Java or JavaScript. So this is where you see some kind of a collaboration between business testers and SDETs and developers, that one is supporting the other in maturing test automation coverage. So I would look at this slide as a nice test automation strategy that combines all different technologies, practitioners, skill sets toward a single goal of high test automation coverage. So when you're looking at certifying test automation, this is coming at the early stages of test automation creation. But what happens on the next level, which is the post-execution stage? This is where the value, in my mind, should actually be realized. Meaning, if you are developing, and I can go back to the example of the 10,000 test cases in a regression suite, okay? You develop them, you executed them, it's fine. But this is a black box. The only way you will see what's going on is within the report. This is why reporting is so essential in realizing value from testing, okay? This is where you can identify things like I'm showing in the slide. What are my top failing test cases, okay? What are the few things that I can do to increase my pass rate? Maybe it's a replacement of a platform. Maybe it's an exclusion of a few test cases for debugging purposes. Which problematic devices and browsers do I have that are actually slowing me down? These kind of quality visibility metrics are key to know what's going on, key to improve and move forward in a very easy way. In Perfecto, we have learned that there are very few common failures, if you go back to the slide of, what's wrong with my lab, with my executions, with my backend services, and my orchestration, these are just few examples that we are seeing live in our cloud day in and day out. And it comes from mostly automation skill set and development perspective. There are some things that are related to the environment being outdated, but at the end of the day, we see things such as pop-up handling, device that is being used right now, and a test was triggered against this specific device. There are common best practices that can avoid seeing this mistake. For example, searching through an REST API, only the available smartphones, iOS devices or Android devices that are not being used. There is an API for that. Okay? Element was not found. This is one of the most ancient history root cause of test automation failures. Okay? I'm not using the right element locator, or a developer changed my element locator and I wasn't aware. So these kind of things are pure noise. Okay? This pure noise needs to be easily reflected in your test results so you can move forward and identify issues rather than focusing on just noise. With Perfecto, and I will show you in the demo, you can actually create your own RCA. So if the built-in failures that we are seeing, like the element not found, device was in use, pop-up handling wasn't well handled, and things like that, you can actually develop your own RCA, your root cause analysis, and expand this quality visibility so you can easily debug and slice and dice your test reports in an easy way, so you can easily assign issues across your team. So if there is a lab issue, you know how to filter it and who is the responsible engineer to fix it. If it's an element locator issue, you know which developer should fix that. But at the end of the day, working with root cause analysis, filtering, slicing, and dicing test data at the end of the cycle obviously shrinks down the fast feedback loop and allows you to better focus on high-value test cases rather than noise. And oh, by the way, you need to also have the same level of visibility within your CI. You have X amount of jobs. This is an example from the Perfecto Cloud, having a 20,000 test cases running within the CI as a regression cycle. Okay, good results here. You see that the level of success is quite high. But what you can see here as well, you can see some inconsistencies in the time of the job, how much time it took between each executions. And why is that important? Because if you see a spike either up or down, it means that you are seeing some instabilities, and it helps visualizing them in front of managers, DevOps engineers, so they can fix that and make this pipeline even more optimized. Lastly, before I move to the demo, I wanted to focus again on, because the Perfecto Cloud is a leading solution in today's market of testing both web applications, responsive websites, and more, but also mobile native applications. There are few important benefits that we have learned and are pitching to our clients as well over the past few years. If you want to have a very consistent lab that is always up to date, I've shown in the previous, actually in the early slides in this presentation, how the market doesn't stop. You see new platforms, new browsers being released every month. You want a cloud solution that can keep up with all these changes rather than having your QA engineers running, especially these days, which is very hard, running to the IT and allowing them or asking them, please upgrade my Mac to a new Safari, or please purchase this new Samsung S20. When you have a cloud, you get this as a service, and you only focus on test creation and execution. You focus on your core job that you were hired to do rather than becoming a lab manager. When you have a cloud, you actually kind of avoid focusing on noise. You have a cloud, you get always availability of your test environment. It's always on, it's reliable, it's being monitored 24/7. So if something happens, you can still be actively and productively running your scripts, whether running from CI or from your IDE. Cloud is by definition, especially within Perfecto, has we define a cloud an enterprise grade. You get full compliant data centers that are secured with all the network configurations that are needed, SOC 2, ISO, and many other certifications, VPN tunnels to your backend services. It's all part of the cloud. You do not need to set it up on your own. You simply point your script, Selenium or Appium, to the cloud, and you get your execution at scale. Unlimited test automation scalability ties back to the previous point, okay? You think about a Selenium grid in the cloud that is infinite. You can put, and I will show you in my demo how you can run at such a large scale your test automation. You are productive anywhere, especially these days when everyone is at home. You are productive from your own house. You can connect remotely to different data centers all over the world and continue writing test cases, executing them, and supporting your digital quality objectives. It's very cost effective. You do not need to do any maintenance. You do not need to go and purchase, or you do not need to fix any lab-related issues. You get it, again, all as a service. You are immune from disaster issues. You have disaster recovery built in. You are always ready for audits. We're working in Perfecto with so many enterprises across multiple verticals. They need to be audit ready at any given time. The cloud gives you exactly that. And as mentioned in this presentation, right, you're talking about feature teams, multiple personas working together. Cloud exactly facilitates cross-team collaboration, allowing multiple teams to see the exact same pane of glass for all the executions in one single point, mobile, web, CI, everything accessible, visible to all different practitioners. Let's do a short demo before we finalize this session. And in this demo, what I wanted to do is show you a nice demo of responsive web testing, okay, that takes a website, a responsive website. It's a pure Selenium test case that runs across multiple platforms. The main point about this demo is not the Selenium script. The Selenium script is not that smart. It simply goes to a web page of the Boston Globe and subscribe to a delivery of, this service. The thing about this demo is that it can scale. This is a standard Selenium project with built on a Maven project, actually, in the IntelliJ IDE. But the beauty of it is the amount or the scale that you can run. You can see here how many platforms have I put in my configuration, and I could have listed even more. Note 10, Pixel 3, iPad 10.2, the latest iPad, Chrome 74, 72, the latest Chrome latest -1. All of these are very easy to configure in the cloud. Think about a Selenium grid exactly like that. How much time would it take you to build such a Selenium grid in-house? Okay? Just configuring an Internet Explorer 11, which we see that are many organizations that are still supporting it. Okay? Going to the latest Firefox version or the latest Chrome beta. It takes time, it takes effort. Okay? Here, I just need to build my test-ng as a data provider on top of a Maven project, write my Selenium script that simply points to a cloud URL, the demo cloud in this case, and click on run. Okay? Once I click on run, let me just move to my website just to launch the live stream so you see it all happening in one place. So now that, now that I've launched my demo cloud, what you will see in a second, you will see a few things. You will see the interactive environment, the codeless Selenium environment, but also the test analysis. I'm going to switch to the live stream. Right now, nothing is running. Okay? Now I'm going to click on run for the test-ng. Okay, this is the test-ng XML here with all the different configuration. You will see all these platforms, L17, Chrome latest, and stuff like that, now being populated in one single place. In my live stream here, these are all triggered through the WebDriver protocol, standard Selenium. Okay? Once the execution starts, you're going to see mobile devices, desktop browsers, all going to the Boston Globe because it's a responsive website, okay? And the script runs as fast as you can imagine, okay? And at the end of the execution, I will show you how the report can be so valuable for you. Again, going back to the title of this webinar, keeping your continuous testing valuable. Think about this regression test. I have executed it so many times, but the latest execution, this is what counts at the end of the day. This is what I want to focus on. You see here the Boston Globe. When I click on that, I can actually see all the different configuration. You can see the Windows 10 with Internet Explorer 11. This is the screen resolution, okay, running on the Boston Globe, and you see all the other executions running here. If I switch here, you can see even more, okay? It's a very long list. It's a huge Selenium grid in the cloud running on my responsive website, okay? So the execution goes on and on. I've been talking to you, I would say, maybe 1 minute, and see how many executions were already completed. While the final ones are done, I'm going to go to the report library, okay? The report library is going to show me all these executions, things that are still running. This is the in progress. But look at that. This is the Boston Globe running on Windows VM beta version, which is 76 on Windows 10. When I click on that, look at how visible the reports are for me, okay? I can go here, I can see all the screenshots from the execution. I can actually see also the video from the report. I can see all the different elements, okay? You can see here, the element locator. I was using the XPath here. This is the input name, okay? I can see all the different screenshots from each and every step of my execution, okay? The screenshots are still being collected as as I show you the report. But at the end of the day, these are all reports that you can go back to, you can share with your developers. And by the way, if something failed, okay, if I go back to a failure and it failed, I can actually tie it back to Jira, okay? I can report the defect directly in Jira. I can connect and, report back to the developer my bug to Jira. This is the integration to Jira. I can also download the report, whatever report I have. I can export it to PDF. I can see the video. I can get a network file, like a HAR file, to understand all the networks. If it was a mobile device, I can actually see the vitals, the CPU, the memory that was used during the test, and many more. Mobile device logs, again, for mobile devices, and much more. So these are all valuable assets from a test execution standpoint to pinpoint issues, to show me what failed and why, okay? In my case, a lot of the test cases that were executed passed, but if you go here, this is the root cause analysis. In an automated fashion, this wasn't the test that I just executed, this is a different test case, but it failed because an element wasn't found. I can click on this test case and it will exactly show me in a second what object wasn't found. It was searching for a text box and it couldn't find it. Okay, it took me just a second to realize. And by the way, when you see an element not found, going back to my session, it's not a bug. It's just noise, and easily I can just exclude the test from the next run and move forward much easier. Okay, so this is a very important point, that reporting enables you to keep your continuous testing suite valuable over time. With that demo, let me go back to my presentation. 1 second, I will just close my screen sharing. And okay, so the last slide that I wanted to show you, 1 second, I was having some issues here. Okay, hopefully you can see the slide here. Sorry, I had some issues with my screen sharing. But the last slide I wanted to share with you, and this is the final one actually, is the following. And this is around the 4 pillars of success in continuous testing. And the importance of this slide is that when you want to build a continuous testing that fits to the entire audience, it means business testers, SDETs, and developers, you want a framework, a unified framework that can support your creation. Again, I've shown you different technologies, different frameworks, okay? Different execution layers, whether they're from CI, from the IDE, from a codeless environment, whatever fits your skill sets and processes needs to fit in your unified solution. And the lab is quite powerful, and that's the main enabler for a good automation at scale. But at the end of the day, you cannot realize value out of these 3 buckets without having a good analysis or reporting solution in place. When you have a reporting that is robust enough and can show you all the noise versus real defect, the inefficiencies that you have over time in regression, in CI, in non-functional testing, and more, is a key to your success, okay? Keep in mind, as mentioned earlier and multiple times in this session, you want a good regression cycle happening over and over again. Having it run successfully 1 or 2 or 3 times in a row, and the 4th time fail, no one will remember the 3 previous times. You want to have a mature environment that can scale and can produce high-value results time after time, okay? So this is my main point to you guys. I think that with that, I would like to summarize the session. I think that we have covered both the coverage aspects that contributes to a very good, solid test automation strategy. We have covered the certification of test automation, whether they're coming from one personas or multiple personas, and the importance of quality visibility within your entire DevOps cycle as a way for moving forward continuously and with great efficiencies, and also in a cost-effective solution. With that, I would like to conclude the session and leave time for Q&A. Thank you.